to galacticconnection.com, one of the most popular blogs on the World Wide Web today for alternative news. Stay tuned for the latest information on our world shift from enslavement to galactic involvement, as well as current intel on any blockages impeding us from our sovereign birthright. Knowledge and self-mastery are key at this time. Our commitment is to present you with the latest breaking conspiratorial articles, off-world messages, exopolitics, cutting-edge technologies and sciences, and also an ever-significant intertwining of spiritual support and metaphysical scope that one needs to dive down the rabbit hole in search for truth with balance. We are truly on the horizon of a new golden age filled with the promise for more love, worldwide peace, and accelerated intuitive skills, where every living being can exist in cohesion and abundance. It is whatever we envision and dream this new world to be. I say to you now, let's redefine the new world to the beginnings of our own precious heaven on earth. Galactic Connection is here to provide the pulse of Mother Earth through an eclectic range of interviews each Tuesday afternoon from 3 to 4:55 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Station 2 on BBS Radio, expanding your perspectives on how we can once and for all take back our freedoms, our joy, and our connection with our mighty I Am presence. Our intention remains true to connect hearts and minds everywhere in order to obtain global unity and galactic and universal acceptance. Our discussions will continue to cover anything to do with galactic society and our involvement with our galactic brothers and sisters. Our guests are experts in their fields, and our radio shows have been coined as some of the most thought-provoking out there. In addition to our daily blog, which runs 365 days a year, we also offer a realm of healing services such as our world-renowned implant removal processes, our spiritual past life clearings, our galactic violet ray alchemy from Alexandra, who shares in the lineage of Merlin, and other cutting-edge healing technologies. Check our site out at galacticconnection.com now, sending you a wave of light, love, and inspiration, and a personal hug and thank you for listening to our Galactic Connection radio show and visiting our blog today. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Alexandra Metters of galacticconnection.com, and today is February 25th, 2014, for my regularly 4 o'clock p.m. BBS radio show. Today I have with me a guest I'm sure many of you have already heard of, which is Karen Hudes. Karen Hudes has really been getting around the alternative media circuit these days, really trying to get the word out to all of us and trying to assist us in freeing the planet from the financial tyranny which enslaves humanity. She's a major proponent of getting the world's gold back to its rightful owner, which is the people, not the Jesuits, and she has a fabulous background. Karen Hudes studied law at Yale Law School and economics at the University of Amsterdam. She also worked in the U.S. Export-Import Bank of the United States from 1980 to 1985, and then went on to the legal department within the World Bank from 1986 to 2007. And in 2007, she actually warned the U.S. Treasury Department and the Congress that the U.S. would lose its right to appoint the president of the World Bank, and she was right. And in 1999, she reported the corrupt takeover of the second largest bank in the Philippines. And it was because of this that she was reprimanded and placed on probation and then ultimately fired in contempt of Congress. So that gives you a little bit of background on Karen, and I'm so excited, Karen, to interview you today. I had so many good questions for you, as does some of the people in my audience. So welcome, and thank you for coming on with me today.
Well, thank you so much for having me on, Alexandra. I'm really excited about this interview.
Good, I am too. And my heart is with you because I feel the passion in your heart. I feel the sincerity in what you are trying to accomplish. And I think the first thing I want to ask you right off the bat is, can you elucidate all of us about what is truly behind all of the bankers' so-called suicides? Apparently,
I can tell you what I've heard.
Okay, great.
Yeah. I don't have any direct first-hand information, so I'm pretty much just extrapolating from my experience and what I've heard is that, first of all, many of these bankers do know each other. Quite a few of them are coming from J.P. Morgan. And what I had read on a website that tends to give out pretty accurate financial information is that the corruption that they were about to expose had to do with the Vatican, and that is, of course, where a lot of this corruption is emanating from. So
yes.
That sounds pretty plausible.
Yeah, I also read that this was something to do with reaping huge tax benefits from life insurance policies on the workers. Do you feel that that's accurate?
You know, that's something I'm hearing from you now for the first time.
Well, it is really shocking to many of us because so many of them, they're, late 20s, early 30s, and then suddenly have a heart attack. And many of us out there are very aware of the death ray guns that are used on people where they suddenly have a heart attack and keel over and die if they want to get rid of somebody. So I was curious if you had heard anything. But with no more prolonging getting into the meat and potatoes, I wanted to ask you a little bit more about the gold situation. There is an intense amount of controversy and confusion on who literally owns the gold. And what I mean by that is who is in control of the collateral accounts. There are many, many players on stage. You've got Keenan. You've got some comments from Fulford. I could go on and on and on. And I'm curious as to what is your position regarding this?
Yes. Well, I'm glad that we're not debating about the amount of the gold, because that's where a lot of people start. So at least we seem to be in agreement that there is a huge amount of gold. And I'll tell you, I didn't know anything about this when I was in the World Bank legal department, because this gold is cloaked in secrecy. I just found out about it because as I've gotten more and more exposure, people have, materialized. They've come out of the woodwork. And some of these people that have come out of the woodwork have come out with disinformation. So I'm working with a group of whistleblowers, and that group is growing as we continue to work and we work together. And it's a loose network. And what happens, and this has happened frequently actually, is that somebody who is a whistleblower will come to the group, and then they will be susceptible to any of the things, either they'll be rewarded or they'll be threatened. And then all of a sudden, instead of working with the group, they work against the group. They do things. And usually the first time I'll be kind of, cautious. I'll start being cautious. And then the second time, I'm just not going to run a risk.
Yeah.
Whether even if it's there's a good explanation, I just cannot run the risk of having, getting derailed.
Yes.
So so that's how it works. Our group of whistleblowers. So getting back to Neil Keenan and Ben Fulford, I start out believing that everybody that comes to me is on the up and up, and it's only after I discover, through one thing or another, that I will then distance myself from them. And that is true of both of these individuals. I will not work with either of them. I do not believe that they are working to improve the situation. Okay. And that's all. I don't want. Sure. I've been threatened to be sued, so I'm not going to elaborate anymore.
Sure, I understand. And in fact, I'm really glad that that's clear, because are you familiar with David Crayford?
Yes, I am. As a matter of fact, we've just, there is a fellow who I've been working very, very closely with. His name is Wolfgang Struck.
Yes.
Wolfgang is a German banker and lawyer who's been living in the Philippines for 20 years. And he contacted me, and we have started to really, really work together. He is authorized to sign for the global collateral accounts. So let me explain for a minute what these accounts are.
I would love for you to go into that and also clarify how he came into that position.
Right, and I have just recently put a lot of the documentation up on the internet because he has given that to me and asked me to do that for him. Getting back to the issue about who is David Crayford. So David Crayford has gotten into a debate with Wolfgang. I started out in this debate because, you know, there's this website that he's the editor of. And after he pulled a fast one on me, what David Crayford did was I put a link to some documents so that people could, that were going to his site, could evaluate the information that I was giving. And he broke the link. And then I went back to him and I confronted him with what he had done. And he didn't even admit that he had done that. And it was, you know, it was perfectly obvious. And then I said, you know what? I'm not going to be debating you on your website. I'm finished with you. And Wolfgang still was involved in the debate with David Crayford. And then Wolfgang got frustrated. And now we're just putting the information up in other places, but certainly not on that website.
Well, good for you, because that website that you're referring to...
Rumor Mill News is what it is.
Yes, it's very well known for being infiltrated by, you know, not such positive factions, so...
Yeah, well, we learned the hard way. But as I said, I started out giving people the benefit of the doubt. And the other thing about that approach is that that's very advantageous, too, because you know what they say about... knowing your enemy and keeping your enemy close to you. Well, that way you get a sense of who they are and where they're coming from and what kind of disinformation there is. So you can recognize other factions later.
Perfect, because that's what we all need to be learning. You know, I really believe that website puts out a tremendous amount of phenomenal information, but it's just like anything else. There are a lot of disinfo agents out there that's what they do for a living, is, you know, try to slam the light workers or the whistleblowers or the people that are trying to get the word out and get the truth out. So it's become much more difficult for all of us seeking out truth to really distinguish between what is true and what is not.
And especially for people who don't come at the problem from the inside or from a piece of the information. For people who don't know what my background is, I was in the World Bank legal department for 20 years. And in addition to being a lawyer, I'm also a development economist. I studied development economics at the University of Amsterdam. I studied law at Yale Law School. I'm an American, but I studied in Holland because during the Vietnam War, I was, I left the country. I was just looking for another country. But then after a while, and Amsterdam was not a bad place to be. And certainly if you want to learn about development economics, the University of Amsterdam is a fabulous place.
I love Amsterdam.
But I realized that if you wanted to work on development economics, you had to find out what was going on with the developed world, because it wasn't just that you knew that there was colonialism, you knew that there was exploitation, and so you wanted to go back to the first world and find out how to get that bad arrangement somehow shifted. So that was one of the reasons I went back. And of course I felt also that being admitted to Yale Law School, I felt that credential was going to be useful. And it's funny, it's actually, at this point in time, it's more harm than good, whereas the economics from the University of Amsterdam has become increasingly important. And that's especially because of what's going on with currency. And people should recognize, I just had an interview with a Hungarian monetary economist named Antal Fekete, who's the world expert on gold. He was the one who, when South Africa celebrated the 100-year anniversary of discovering gold in Witwatersrand, they invited Antal Fekete to give the keynote address. Anyway, according to Antal, we are now at a cliff which is the same kind of cliff that we were at in the 300s, just before we went into the Dark Ages, because gold is about to go into hiding. All of the currencies, the paper currencies, are about to collapse. And it's very, very dramatic. And you can, as Antal mentions this, you know what the signs are, and you can actually measure it now because we have futures markets. And so if the price of gold in the future is less than the price of gold for immediate delivery, that shows you that people are starting to hoard gold, that they think that the paper currencies, that they have lost their confidence in paper currencies. There's another indicator, and that is central banks lease their gold. But at a certain point in time, they're afraid that at the end of the lease term, the party will renege, and instead of giving back the gold, they'll just cash it out. And so it gets to be too expensive to lease the gold anymore. Anyway, so the central banks stopped leasing gold back in July, and we've been in gold backwardation now since July. Well, it's been actually for more than a year. So we're now, and as Antal Fekete characterizes this, we are on red alert for all of the paper currencies crashing. And this makes perfect sense. When you think about it, paper currency is just paper, and if you have no confidence in it,
exactly,
then it starts to get more and more iffy. And of course, with what's been going on with something that they call quantitative easing, and that's the thing about lawyers and some economists is they like to use fancy words to make people think that they have no right to get involved in the issue. They try to scare people away from figuring out what's going on. And you can't allow yourself to be intimidated by this kind of trick. It's just a trick. Usually, so what I'm trying to say now is that quantitative easing is a lie. It's just a word for running the printing presses to deliberately crash the dollar. And why, you would ask yourself, why would somebody want to deliberately crash the dollar? It's because they want to dismantle the economic and military strength of the United States. It's a sabotage.
Yeah.
And I asked the chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Martin Dempsey, on December 2nd. He had a town hall meeting. I asked him why he was trying to deliberately crash the dollar, because we have an offer in the United States to do exactly what John F. Kennedy had accomplished 10 days before his assassination. John F. Kennedy had signed something called the Green Hilton, Hilton as in Hilton Hotel, the Green Hilton Agreement. What John F. Kennedy had done was he had arranged for gold in the collateral account to be used to underpin dollars to be issued directly by the United States Treasury, not the Federal Reserve. What happens with the Federal Reserve, when the Federal Reserve prints money, is first the Treasury Department sends, it's called a promissory note. We, the United States citizens, promise to repay this money we're borrowing. We are going to repay it with a certain amount of interest on it. And what's really fascinating is that money didn't exist before. It's being created by the printing presses. Now, why should the Federal Reserve have the right to print the money and get interest on it? This is just a scam.
Well, and not only that, it's foreign corporations that are making money off of us printing money within our own country. And makes absolutely no sense whatsoever.
No, the only one it makes any sense for is the bankers. And if you go back through history, you find out that there were presidents who were assassinated for trying to take back the right to print the dollar by the Treasury Department.
Absolutely.
Abraham Lincoln was one of those presidents.
Hamilton, right?
Printing greenbacks. And Andrew Jackson actually was nearly assassinated, but they missed him, and he did succeed, actually, for a time in getting the U.S. to print its own currency. But what's been going on is that there is a group at the very center of the world financial system. This group has been there since before the previous ice age, only we didn't know about them.
So, Karen, back up for a second. You've made a very interesting statement about they stopped leasing the gold in July of last year. Why then?
The reason why is because people started losing confidence. It's a market thing. The cost of the lease was too high. You would have to price the amount of penalty at the end of the lease if you don't return the gold. That penalty was too high because people were starting to keep the gold and hoard it. The risk got to be too high. It's just a matter of pricing the risk.
Okay.
And the reason why it got riskier and riskier is because with this quantitative easing, with this printing of dollars with no backing, the dollars are losing their credibility. We're losing confidence in them.
You know, I like the fact that you made that specifically clear, because it's not about them losing value because they are valueless. It's because they've lost the confidence of the people, you know. So now you also mentioned something about we weren't going to argue about the amount of gold, and I have it listed here below that you spoke about. There's a lot. 170,500.
That's just the U.S. share.
That's just the United States, and then 130,500 in Hawaii and Hong Kong, and 150,000 in Singapore, and 120,000 in Japan, and 100,000 in the American banks, and 130,000 in Thailand. And I guess my question to you is, you also mentioned something about the gold versus the unregistered gold. Now, is this the reason that there is so much speculation on what the true amount is?
When I said unregistered, I don't remember that word. I mean, I know that some of the gold is, most of it is in the Philippines.
Right.
I think it's 600,000 metric tons is in the central bank of the Philippines, and then there's another more than 100,000 which is buried in the Philippines. And then there's over 200,000 metric tons in Union Bank of Switzerland. That's, you know, right around the corner from the Vatican. That's, yeah. So, it's all over the place, that gold. And who does it belong to? It belongs to humanity. It's in one trust. Now, if people don't know what a trust is, I can explain that. That's when somebody is taking care of something for somebody else. That's a trust, and there's a legal form for doing that. And the person who's supposed to be taking care of the what's in the trust is called the trustee. And the trustee is given the authority to act for the benefit of the people who are they're called beneficiaries. That's what a trust is. You take care of something for somebody else. And so the person who's taking care of the world's gold for the world's people is Wolfgang Struck. And he got to do this because that was what Ferdinand Marcos was doing. And just before Ferdinand Marcos died, he assigned the right to be the trustee on these collateral accounts, is what they're called. He assigned it to Wolfgang was the lawyer and banker. And then there was a Filipino who's also got that responsibility.
So what keeps Wolfgang alive and safe?
You know, he was very, very shy in the very beginning, but he started to get the hang of it when he saw what was going on with me. It's called hiding in plain light.
Yeah. This is true. Well, I mean, that's an incredible responsibility on only one person's shoulders. But I do know, it's very interesting, Karen, because back in the late 90s, I was aware of this. I was aware of the gold in the Philippines. I even saw pictures and had some secret meetings with some people that had this information. I was just blown away. And
I worked on the Philippines, and I didn't know about it. I was there in the late 90s as well as the World Bank lawyer. And I got involved with the president at the time was Joseph Estrada, who got impeached by the Chief Justice of the Philippine Supreme Court. I was working with Hilario Davide on a judicial reform project. And so I was working on the Philippines for about 3 years, and then I got reassigned because I started reporting the corruption there. And people in the World Bank wanted me to, just ignore it, and I wouldn't. And so that was the beginning of the cover-up that I started reporting. So I didn't know about the world corruption. I was just looking at it from the point of view of a lawyer who's working inside a bank, and I was just following the rules for lawyers. And the thing about the World Bank is it's right at the very center of the world financial system, and so is its sister organization called the International Monetary Fund. And it's only now that I found out that the World Bank and the IMF, when they were created deliberately on that pile of gold, and they were given a function with that gold. So, but I didn't learn about this until after Wolfgang was showing me the documents. But what I did know was that there was corruption, and that the people who were buying World Bank bonds, because the World Bank sells bonds on the capital markets, and then it has to give accurate financial information. So when I got fired illegally, I knew that if I bought a World Bank bond, I could sue the World Bank as a bondholder, and the World Bank would not have any immunity as an international organization, because the World Bank has waived its immunity for bondholders. I knew a lot of the tricks of an insider, because one of the lawyers who had been there when the World Bank was created in 1944 was a Dutch lawyer named Aaron Brockes, and I got to know him when he was an old man, and even before I went to the World Bank, because I always knew I wanted to work at the World Bank. So, he told me that when Robert McNamara went to the World Bank as the World Bank president in 1968, that's when the World Bank started to get corrupt. So I knew that there was a problem, and I also knew that the legal department was at the very heart of the World Bank, because the way the World Bank works is it used to have automatically a president appointed just by the president of the United States without any of the other countries having a say-so. And at the International Monetary Fund across the street, the managing director of the IMF would be appointed by the Europeans without anybody else's say-so. But that changed in 2010, and it was called the Gentleman's Agreement. The Gentleman's Agreement no longer exists, and now the countries who own the World Bank, there are 188 of them, they can decide who gets to be the new president. And so the current president, Jim Kim, had to compete with two other candidates because the Gentleman's Agreement ended. And I warned the U.S. Treasury Department that we were going to lose the Gentleman's Agreement. I warned them in 2007 based on a very accurate, it's called game theory modeling. You use a computer to simulate how coalitions will form. And this model, I learned about it because there's a political scientist named Jacek Kugler who came to the World Bank from the Department of Defense. He had developed this for the Department of Defense. And he came to the World Bank and he said, I've used a different formula. It works the same, but the Department of Defense has no right to this second model. And I can use this model in a World Bank project. And so we used it in Ghana. And then I asked Jacek if I could model rule of law at the World Bank. And Jacek said, sure. And I did. And that's why I could tell the Treasury Department, we modeled that in 2004, and then in 2007, when I saw that there was this corruption that wasn't going away, I went to the Treasury Department, and then I went to the U.S. Congress, and you can see on my website the letters that I was writing warning about this. And this model is in the Department of Defense. I spoke to Secretary Chuck Hagel about it when he was a senator for Nebraska in 2008. So when he became the Secretary of Defense, I went to the Inspector General of the Department of Defense, and I said, you know full well how accurate this model is. It's 90 to 95% accurate. I said, we are on a collision course to World War III. First, we're going to have a currency war unless we start playing by the rules. And so I have been all over the Department of Defense since then. And where we are right now is I understand that a lot of veterans, I've been giving them the literature on this model. There's a very good German journalist named Lars Schall, and he wrote an article. And in that article, you can see links to this model, and you can see descriptions of, the experience and the track record of this model. And that's one of the reasons I'm very, very optimistic that we are not going to go into permanent gold backwardation, because this model started predicting when I got a statement up on the UK Parliament website, because there's an English whistleblower from the World Bank named Elaine Colville. She's Scottish. And the two of us have just been working kind of like a dog and pony show, and we've gotten actually 3 statements up on the UK Parliament website. The last one was in July. You can see what our statements are. The model, once we got our statements up on the UK Parliament website, this model is 90 to 95% accurate. It's predicting that there's going to be an end to this corruption in the financial system. It's predicting that the gold is going to come out for the benefit of humanity. And this is 90 to 95% accurate. And I think that's also, Wolfgang, I've been sharing all of this information with him, and he's he's waiting for this model to work.
Well, I think there's many of us that actually do believe that, especially if we're coming from the spiritual community. I think I have a myriad of questions to ask you. Going back to the World Bank and the 188 countries that are members, which countries are not part of the World Bank?
If I wrote, you go to the UN, and I've been writing to all of the missions, the New York missions to the UN, and if you line these up, you see which North Korea is one.
I think it's Iran, isn't it?
Yeah, that's also one, and there are some others, some obscure islands. It's a handful, but most of the countries are members.
Okay, I was just curious about that. And also, what is your perspective on China's up-and-coming, supposedly $23 trillion default that has begun? How is that impacting the U.S.?
They're defaulting on what? I'm sorry.
On the stocks, as far as our debt.
You mean they're selling the treasuries that they bought? Is that what you mean?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. That was that's an interesting story, actually. The CNN started running a story about that about maybe a month ago.
Yeah.
They said that China was dumping its U.S. Treasury and bills that it had, and it also said that China was preventing ships from sailing in their, the South Seas surrounding China. And so what I did was I went to all of the countries that are members of the UN mission. I sent them an email, and I explained how what was really going on was that this gold belongs to humanity and needs to come out of hiding, and that that's really the first order of business, and that everything else is a distraction meant to take people away from this first order of business. And the reason why it's the first order of business is because if we don't have currency, think about how interconnected the economies are, and we can't pay for international trade, we can't pay for medicine. And then think of how our goods are assembled from parts that come from abroad. You can't just end that trade overnight and have the economies continue to function. So what you would have is mass starvation. Not only that, but once you go into that situation, it's kind of like a black hole. You have no equipment to get out of it. You can't dig your way out of it. That's why the countries were in the dark ages for so long. It's like all of the economies implode.
Well, what kind of response did you get after writing all the countries?
What happened, you'll remember, was CNN the next day said we were hacked.
Ah.
And, I spoke to people. They said they're familiar with the CNN newsroom. They said there is absolutely no way that a story like that could have been released by CNN through a hacker. They took it back. They took it back because they saw how people were reacting.
Oh, God, that's too funny.
Yeah. So, and, this same situation is actually now going on because in Australia, the group of 20 is meeting. And I have sent out a series of emails. First of all, there's you can go on the web and you can see somebody went out and posted, I forget the name of this blogger. It's a JP somebody or other. I think it's a pen name. Has posted about what it is that the world currency should now, instead of being backed by U.S. dollars as the reserve currency, it should be backed by something called special drawing rights of the International Monetary Fund.
Yes, SDRs, yes.
Yeah. Now, what's happening with the dollar as the dollar weakens is, first of all, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, the BRICS countries, are no longer using dollars as the price for their international trade.
Correct.
They're using offsets, and then if somebody owes money at the end of the day, they're going to settle it with gold. So in 25% of international trade, the dollar is no longer the international reserve currency. This is something enormous.
Yeah.
And the other enormous development is the fact that there is a fourth credit rating agency, which is owned by the Russians and the Chinese. That's called the Universal Credit Rating Group. And that group, China has already downgraded the U.S. credit rating.
Now, how does that affect us? Like, for the layman that is not heavily into the financial sector, can you explain exactly how that affects us and our economy, et cetera?
If we are paying interest on our debt and our credit rating deteriorates, we have to pay more interest in order to borrow. People are going to want to get a bigger return to cover the added risk of holding dollars. So it's, it just makes, it's got an enormous impact, a humongous impact.
Now, are they planning on opening up additional credit rating agencies, or?
All you need is another one, because the three credit rating agencies, Standard & Poor, downgraded the U.S. for the very first time, and then Eric Holder, the Attorney General, sued Standard & Poor over something else. And the lawyer representing Standard & Poor said that Eric Holder brought that lawsuit exactly at the same time that Standard & Poor lowered the credit rating. So, that doesn't work if the credit rating agencies are being prevented from disseminating correct information. That's why you need a fourth one.
And an unbiased party, for sure.
Yes. So the problem is, of course, the illegality that the World Bank whistleblowers have been reporting. I reported, I was telling you that I had been the country lawyer in the Philippines. What I reported was that there was a cover-up of corruption in the Philippines on a banking sector loan where the loan ended up with $900 million worth of problem. I can go into exactly how you get up the $900 million worth of problem. But believe me, it was not a successful project. And the evaluation department lied to the board of the World Bank and said that the World Bank could not have foreseen that this outcome would have happened, and so therefore the World Bank should not be given a bad grade for its role in supervising that project. And I wrote a memo saying that the board had been misinformed. That's a cover-up to the board. And I was interviewed for the job of general counsel at the World Bank, and during that interview, they said, why is there such a high turnover in the general counsel job? And I said, that's easy. It's because the World Bank is not in compliance on the capital markets. That's the technical word to say that the board is not getting the information it needs. And just remember Enron.
Yeah.
When a board is being duped, and it's a financial entity, that is a huge problem. And so the executive search firm, that was Randall Reynolds, knew that they had to solve that problem. When a general counsel says that the company, the financial company, is out of compliance, if there's a job search for general counsel, the World Bank, the client, has got to be brought into compliance. That's the job of the executive search firm. And so I kept asking for what was the information that the executive search firm gave to the World Bank when I made that disclosure. I knew that there had to be consequences. And so when, I went to the Treasury Department, I went what they call up the corporate ladder. I went to the Audit Committee. I went to the Treasury Department when that didn't work. And you can see in the chronology that I also testified to the European Parliament, and I gave the European Parliament that detailed chronology. And the legal department of the European Parliament then went to the World Bank, and I got correspondence documenting that. So what I have is I knew that when I had documented all of this, and I had gone to such things as the European Parliament and the UK Parliament, I knew that things were going to resolve. There was no way for them not to resolve. Well, there was one way for them not to resolve, and that was to end up in a currency war. I knew that civilization was at a fork in the road.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was at the very heart of that fork, and I was not going to let them take the wrong road. So you will see in a letter on my website, I went to the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, because he's also the chair of something called the Judicial Conference. That's the group that oversees the federal court system. And when that problem didn't resolve, I knew that we had something called state capture in the United States. That's when the government is so corrupt that it cannot right itself. That's like you're in a boat and the rudder is not working.
Which is where we are at.
So I had documented that. And then I wrote a second, stronger letter to, there's the Judicial Conference, and then there's an executive committee of the Judicial Conference. So just before the spring meetings in the World Bank in April of 2013, I went to the chair of the executive committee, that's Justice Traxler, and I said, 188 ministers of finance are looking to see whether the judiciary is going to pick the right fork in the road. They want to know where the United States is standing in this grave crisis. And that's the letter that I just circulated with some other documentation to all of the countries whose missions are in the United Nations. And I said, you people know that you are entitled to the gold, and you also know that the World Bank and the IMF are the ones to hand this out, not the Group of 20, not the rich countries. All of the countries of the world are entitled to a seat at the table when this gold is divvied up. So this Group of 20, the meeting that they're having, has nothing to do with deciding what happens to the gold. Yeah?
Wow. So
I put the brakes on the Group of 20.
That's awesome. And I commend you for that. I think the thing that is difficult for all of us that follow this, and I mean there's many out there that are following the progress that you and the other whistleblowers are making, is we're still confused about who the players are, who's on the good team, Who's on the I don't really care about humanity team. I just want to get the gold for me. And I've had many people write me. We have, for example, White Dragon Society. I've heard that there's positive and negative to that. Can you comment on that?
The White Dragon Society doesn't exist. It's just the Jesuits playing games, creating theater.
Interesting. Okay, what about prosperity programs?
Okay. Let me tell you about the International Court of Justice.
Okay.
All right. First, let's talk about where this gold came from.
Great.
It started with the pharaohs, King Solomon's gold. Then you've got the Incas and the Mayas and all of the gold in Latin America that the conquistadors got. And don't forget, the Philippines was Spain's colony.
Right.
And then this guy Yamashita. Let me tell you who Yamashita is or was. Queen Victoria had a twin, Prince Talano, and Prince Talano was sent to the Philippines. And then he went around the world having affairs. And so General Yamashita was a son of Prince Talano and a Japanese woman. Adolf Hitler was a son of Prince Talano with a German woman.
Doesn't surprise me though.
Okay. So anyway, General Yamashita went around just before, in the 30s, just before World War II, and he said, you can't hold on to your gold because it's going to be looted during the upcoming war, and therefore we will give you a bond denominated in gold. It's a certificate that says you're going to get 4% interest and you're going to get your gold back, but give us the gold for safekeeping. Yeah? And they also went to the countries, 66 countries, and took the gold of the countries and gave them certificates. There are, Wolfgang Struck has $210 trillion worth of gold certificates.
Whoa.
With all of the right numbers. You can see pictures of the Federal Reserve box that those bonds were in. Yeah. Now, that cancels the U.S. debt, by the way.
And doesn't it cancel a lot of other countries' debts, too?
Yes. And that's why the bankers, of course, will not honor these bonds. They want to keep charging interest. They don't want to say that they owe money, which is, the world is net creditors.
But, here's my other question. If this whole financial system is a farce to begin with, is the debt even is it something we really have to hold ourselves accountable to?
Well, you do have to do the accounting, but then the question is, who does the accounting and is it reliable? Yeah?
Yes.
And can it be done in a transparent way? Do we have the institutions? And are we able, after all of this terrible corruption that has gone on for millennia, are we able to get ourselves straightened out and fly straight? That's a question that I ask the World Bank whistleblowers. I say, if we go back inside the World Bank, now they're just wrapping their minds around the fact that the World Bank has been sitting on all of this treasure, the world's wealth. And just to give you a flavor of it, a month ago, there were 4 paintings. One of them was by Monet of the water lilies, and Imelda Marcos's maid had sold one of them for $34 million, and she was convicted. Anyway, Wolfgang had me write a letter to the lawyers representing Imelda Marcos's maid. I've forgotten her name. Anyway, saying this painting belongs in the collateral account. It belongs to humanity.
Very interesting. Do you feel that the ultimate core reason we went into World War II was about the gold?
No. We went into all of the world wars because the bankers wanted to keep humanity in debt and paying interest to them, and also keeping people divide and conquer.
Yeah, they're really good at that.
Yeah, so that's what we're seeing now with the Ukraine. It's a way, instead of allowing us to focus on getting our act together before gold goes into permanent gold backwardation, they want us to be distracted with all of these things. Mm-hmm. It's like a three-ring circus.
So you had mentioned that it was definitely confirmed that the Chinese and the Russian military were working with the U.S. military to dethrone this elite group.
Well, let me tell you how it works.
Do you feel like that's still very much...
Let me tell you how it works.
Okay.
Because don't forget, you've got a few of these, I call them gatekeepers. You've got the chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. I've had two people write me to tell me that he's a Knight of Malta. Your listeners know what a Knight of Malta is, don't you?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So, and then there's in the military, there's the Inspector General. I've written him because you know, of course, what happened on the 8th of October, which was when there was a nuclear bomb that was detonated off the coast of Charleston, 600 miles off the coast. And the reason it didn't go off over the citizens of Charleston is because of two heroes.
Yes. There's
Major General Michael Carey, who was commander of the 20th Air Force, also Vice Admiral Tim Giardina.
Yes. I think there was a total of 22 of them that got canned, right?
It's gotten up to 200 as far as I know. And I wrote to the Inspector General and I said, the pretexts for firing these commanders do not comply with the personnel policies. And that's your job to make sure that things are done correctly. They're not being done correctly. So you've got these people in the very important key positions that are traitors, that are dismantling the Army and the Navy, but it's in plain view. So this is where people have got to make it clear that they find this totally unacceptable.
Yeah.
Why would the United States allow its military to be dismantled? How can we be a strong country with these traitors in those key positions that are acting at the behest of the Jesuits?
Well,
no, we can't accept this.
Kara, that's true, but at the same time, because of the amount of disinformation out there, people don't know who is on their team and who's not on their team.
But so then to answer your question, Alexandra, about are the militaries working together? Yes, but you've got these traitors that are. So what can you say about the United States military? Because of course they're supposed to follow the senior commanders.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the very interesting articles that I read is that you've got some of the mid-level brass who are fearing for their lives because you've heard of friendly fire?
Yes.
These guys, if they're not loyal to the military, the troops are taking them out.
Wow.
So you have got a military where it's pretty clear that the military at the bottom is not following the military brass who are traitors. And the ones in the middle, the mid-level officers, are getting in the crossfire. So that's what you have.
What a mess.
I'd much rather have this than have people just following traitors off the cliff. You've got humanity that is no longer acting like a lemming. This is good.
No, it is good. I mean, there have been some phenomenal groups stepping forward from the Saudi war that are really, they've thrown their medals aside and they've said, I didn't go into the military to fight for one specific faction and shoot upon my own family and citizenry.
I'm trying to remember, and I really should know this, the football player. Is it Trilling?
I think I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, the football player who was going to come back home and tell people what was really going on in Afghanistan, that what we were doing is we were raising poppies for
opium,
for drugs.
Yeah.
That's what we were doing in Afghanistan.
Yep, heroin. Yeah, well, according to some of the other people that I interview, one of the major ways of the cabal making money is through the drug trade. And that's one of the most active sectors of the resistance to try to shut that down.
I'm sorry to tell you, it's much deeper than that. Because
absolutely.
We are sending our tax dollars to the City of London and the Vatican.
Yeah.
That drug money is running our government.
Unfortunately, I agree. I totally agree.
So it's not drug money just for a few bribes here and there. It's the bread and butter of our budget.
So where do we go from here, Karen? I mean, and I wanted to ask you, I mean, if we go over time, do you have more time?
Sure.
Okay, because what I can do is I can split this into components on the website, because there's so much to cover. People have been waiting for this interview, by the way. I've had several people writing it to me. Where do we go from here? I mean, you have talked many times about this group of whistleblowers. Many people have asked me, why are you all not united and maybe have a name or something where all of us can contribute ideas and support and even maybe funding or whatever?
Just think about it.
Okay.
Think about the personal risk. Think about what it's going to do to the lives of the families of these people. I'm just amazed that there's anybody willing to be public about this, frankly.
Yeah.
I'm amazed that we're all in contact with each other. So, you know, you've got to take it the way it is. And believe me, we are not far from going back into the World Bank and distributing the world's gold. I personally believe that. And you will see who these people are. You know, they took a very vocal, upfront place at the World Bank when they were discharged for pointing out the fraud and the bad accounting, and you know, so they're reliable people, and I would certainly never have been able to manage without the information that they were feeding me. So I would be at my desk and somebody would call up and say, Karen, you've got to go to this hearing in Congress, and I would, you know, jump in my car and go there. So, you know, we've been working like a tag team to get things where they are now. It's amazing that we were able to hold it together this long.
So do you feel that you're able to hold these main players accountable because of the legal system that they themselves use? Is that like the primary component that's kind of keeping their hand to the fire?
What's keeping their hand to the fire is that everybody is really doing their job. So for example, if you read that book by, I called him Michael O'Bannon, it's really Robert O'Bannon.
Okay.
He's the ex-Marine who wrote a book, and he's the one who said that the military are working together, and that is absolutely true, but it's not like you would go to the the Secretary of the of Defense and say, okay, Secretary Hagel, I see you're in working together with the Chinese and the Russians. No, he would not say that.
No.
But if you read what Robert O'Bannon says, it's perfectly plausible that the militaries are all bound and determined to work together to get this corruption straightened out. They understand what's at stake.
You know, I'm glad you brought this up because I'm a military brat. My dad was a colonel in the Air Force. He was a fighter pilot and also in Vietnam, served time, and in my opinion was a major hero. Okay, and because of being brought up in that environment, I totally believe by the amazing high number of people I've met in the military, the number one reason that they join is because ultimately really want to support, defend, and protect their country, period. And the government has, maybe I shouldn't say the government, but the military has received such terrible reports. And again, once again, it's just like what you said. It's a divide and conquer type of thing. I love what David Icke has put out, where you have your problem, reaction, solution. So they create the problem so that people just do not trust the military at all. And I think that's one of my other questions, and I'm not even sure if you're the right person to ask this, but, I'm wondering how would it be if it gets to the point where the positive military comes in at that point where we are taking the gold back, we're taking our power back. How will the citizens around the world react to their own, country's military? Because the amount of incredible negative press that they've received.
See, the way I think it's working is that there is a world coalition. The world is pulling together on this. We have the institutional machinery for that in the Bretton Woods institutions. Although the cabal thought they owned it, guess what? It's like jujitsu. We can turn it around.
True.
And so we've got that framework. And so we can have a framework for rule of law, but it's not like that Bretton Woods institution is going to come in to each of the countries and tell them what to do. What we're going to do in the United States is we're going to use something called Article 5 of the Constitution, which said that when 2/3 of the states request a constitutional convention, there will be one. Okay, we're going to use that. And a lot of people say, oh, well, there's no way that we will be able to come up with something good. And all we have to do from the get-go is to get rid of the secret second constitution. We have to say that's no longer in effect.
Karen, talk a little bit more about that for the audience, because there are some people that are not aware of that. I am aware, but I'd like you to talk to them about that.
Okay, what happened in the Treaty of Paris that Benjamin Franklin negotiated was the banks who had loaned money to the colonies were told that they could get it back. It would be repaid in 70 years. And then we didn't have the money, so we were in bankruptcy. And then there was the Civil War. And so there was another, in 1871, there was a secret constitution which said that the United States was going to be created as a corporation. And the corporation was going to repay the debts. So, and people aren't aware of it. It was done secretly. That's when the District of Columbia was created. And so what we have to do is we have to repeal that second secret constitution. And then after that, first of all, the way it works is you have a convention and you propose what it is you're going to do. And it's got to be ratified by 3/4 of the state legislatures. So if it's a really bad thing, it's not going to get 3/4 of the state legislatures to agree to it. Right. And there's one thing that I think it would be pretty easy to get 3/4 of the state's legislatures to agree to, and that is to repeal that second secret constitution.
You really think so?
Well, do you think American citizens want their tax dollars going to the City of London? That's what that Constitution is about.
No, but of course not. But I just don't feel like the Congress is really representing the positive, turnout for the people.
No, the Congress has nothing to do with it. The only thing the Congress has to do with it is that they are required to convene it. And then you've got 2 representatives from each of the states, and they come up with proposals.
Okay.
That are then voted on by the states. The Congress is not part of this. The only thing that the Congress has to do is they have to add up the number of requests and they have to convene the convention. And they haven't done that. They haven't done their job. They're AWOL.
So on our end, we have to come up with 2 definitely high caliber individuals per state to be representatives for this cause.
That's right.
Interesting.
And they are just simply going to propose things that get ratified.
Okay.
Or not. So so if they do a bad job, then it's not going to get ratified. It's not like they're going to hijack the place.
So, a lot of people talk about right now, here today, how do we get the gold back and how do we bring the Jesuits down, et cetera, et cetera. I would like to ask you, how do you foresee this new system unfolding transparently?
The very first thing is that people have got to figure out how they know whether it's working or it isn't working. Yeah? And so I can give you a couple of what I think are ways to find that out. And the first thing is to see what's going on with the World Bank whistleblowers and other whistleblowers who you know are real whistleblowers. So that's the way to know whether you're getting real information. And if you don't know that the information you're getting from the mainstream media is bought and sold by these corrupt groups, and just so people know how we know that they're corrupt groups, this Federal Institute of Technology did a very accurate analysis of the companies on the capital markets and found out that there were 43,000 of them, and 60% of the assets or of the earnings of these companies are going to one single conglomerate. So and that conglomerate has bought all of the mainstream media. So if you're waiting to hear news, you're just buying the newspapers and, that's, as far as you're concerned, that's the news, then it's going to be pretty clear that things are not going to get better. You've got to learn that you have to be critical of any information you're getting. Who's telling it to you? Do they have a motive? Try to evaluate that. You cannot just take things for granted and just sort of sit back and expect that things are going to right themselves without your doing your part. You have to start getting involved and weighing the information. I never object when people ask me hard questions. I always come up with, proof of it. And a lot of times, if I don't have the proof of it, I have to go back and reevaluate myself what it is, what's going on.
Well, you have quite a support team out there, Karen, and you may not know that all the time, but you do. And we know that it's got to take a tremendous amount of, tenacity, big time on your part, to keep chasing this down the road, kicking the can down the road to get to the ultimate goal. I mean, it appears to me you are so divinely positioned because of your legal background to be in the place that you are right now. And, I'm wondering to you, again, what do the people out there look for as far as who can we really trust to follow the movement that's going on within the financial sector?
I would say if you're just going to say that one person, and I'll just take everything that they tell me, you haven't been listening to what I've been telling you.
Okay.
I said the groups of whistleblowers themselves are always evaluating the people they're working with because something might have led them to start doing things for another reason. So you just cannot let up. Unfortunately, you have got to be critical thinkers. And by critical thinkers, that means, what I say to a couple of people that I'm just not working with anymore, I say, if you walk like a duck and quack like a duck, I have got to act as if I think you're a duck.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And they can be, doing helpful things and then all of a sudden quacking and walking like a duck. That's it.
Right, because the character's not there.
I don't, I think, let me change the subject at the very end to something which we haven't really touched on, and that is religion.
Okay.
I don't want to hear from somebody about what they think their religion is. I want to see what they do.
Yeah. Good point. Good point. I love it. Well, and what do you feel as far as, when you bring up religion? I'm not sure if you want to talk about this, but if we follow the money and we go from the proceeds of the tax dollars that are being collected, and you said 40% goes to the UK or whatever, the City of London, right? And then 60% goes to the Vatican. And then you and I had a conversation one day, and I was like, well, okay, where does it go from there? Are you willing to expound upon that?
Yeah, and let's just talk a little bit about religion.
Sure.
Because people think that I'm anti-Catholic, and they say, well, this is a Jewish lady who's blaming the Jesuits. That doesn't work. I got into a huge fight with somebody who was trying to divide me and Wolfgang Struck, because they were telling him, that he was anti-Semitic. And I told them I wasn't going to work with them anymore. You take people at face value for what it is they're doing, first of all. And second of all, this whole business about religion has been used to divide and conquer people.
Absolutely.
You have got to you can't look inside somebody's heart to see whether they're in service to their fellow man, and whether they're treating, what kind of a human being they are.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as I'm concerned, you have got to stop calling people names. Just, and one of the questions I'm getting is what's supposed to happen with Israel? Because there is a huge problem.
Oh, yes.
With what's going on in the Middle East. And the answer that I gave them is you have to look at the scholars who are dealing with Maimonides, who was the foremost philosopher. And he was raised by the Spanish in the middle, in the 1200s. He was raised, the people who carried the spark of civilization through the Dark Ages happened to be the Arab civilization, happened to be the Moors.
Mm.
Yeah, so it's not, you cannot, and let me get to the very difficult conversation, which is what's behind the Jesuits. It's, as far as I know, because I'm, as I said, I'm working with whistleblowers. There's a neurologist who came and said, there is another species on this planet that has a huge brain, and they have been the nemesis of humanity.
Mm-hmm.
They have been the ones that have been dividing human beings and getting them to hate each other and to play one religion off against the other. And what they did was, whenever the religious books were being written, they were putting provisions in there. They were taking what the prophet said and they were twisting it. They weren't translating it properly. They were not taking the teachings and that were there, and they were twisting them in a way that made human beings susceptible to being brainwashed.
Yeah.
We have to learn how to use our own intuition and our own instincts and our own love of our own species. We don't hate each other. We don't want to kill each other. We don't want to have wars. We've been manipulated through people who were using our sense of religion to mislead us.
Well, and we need to get away from labels, period. I'm Alexandra, you're Karen. I don't care if you're Jewish or Buddhist or, I'm not looking at you and talking to you today because of whatever religion you are. I'm talking to you today because I want to hear what you have to say about the financial world. And the more that we can step back, I talk about this all the time with my audience when anybody writes into me, and that is, we need to stop getting so polarized in our thinking, because that's exactly what they want to do, and that is what creates the conflict. And there is so much information out there. It's much better to remain in a state of neutrality in observing that information, and then, as you said, using critical thinking and intuitiveness trusting in your own inner voice to see what rings true to you. Because sometimes your truth and my truth, Karen, if you look at something that happens down the street and I see the same thing, we're going to still have a different perspective of what happened. That's what makes the world go round. Are you there?
I'm shaking my head, yes.
Okay. So you were talking a bit about the Homo capensis, right?
Yes.
That's what you're alluding to. And tell me a little bit about how did you stumble upon this? You met a neurologist of all people?
Actually, what happened was there are groups of whistleblowers, and we've been coalescing. So one of the groups that has coalesced is a group of people that were working on the 9/11 problem. That's called Able Danger. That group.
Ooh, cool.
And and so when you get involved with a group of whistleblowers or a group that's been working together, it's like putting a jigsaw puzzle together. They were working at it from one side, and you kind of mesh the insights. And then there was another group coming out of the film industry. There's a film producer, Edmund Dwyer, who did The Banksters Made Off with America.
Oh, I've heard about that, yeah.
Yeah. And so he had put a lot of information together, and one of the people that he introduced me to is this neurologist named Ed Spencer. And Ed is the one that was telling me about Homo capensis and MK Ultra, which is a way of trying to use people's minds to mislead them.
Mm-hmm.
And there are all kinds of technology that people don't know about that's been developed.
I mean, look at the LA riots a while back. Oh my God. I mean, that was completely blown wide open as far as the amount of manipulation that was used on the people. And it was, all the folks out there that listen, you got to know that we are in a petri dish. And literally we are experiments all the time. They know very much about the way humanity works, the way that we respond, our emotional bodies, how we react emotionally, and they are going to use that to their advantage to maintain their power and authority over humanity.
One of the very sad things that I just saw recently was how some young girls who had been subjected to MK Ultra testified in Congress.
Wow.
And this was a while ago. And the Congress just took the information in and didn't do anything with it. So because these were young people whose lives had been just totally demolished. They became sex slaves.
Wow.
And they risked everything to tell people about their horrible experiences, and the Congress just took that information and didn't act on it, didn't protect them, nothing. So as far as I was concerned, they were they were victimized twice. The first time as MK Ultra victims, and the second time as having risked everything to make it possible for Congress to do something, and Congress did nothing.
And what is that telling us? That's telling us that we have to take our power back and stop depending on institutions that are not out there for our best interests. I mean, this is why I'm speaking to you today. I wanted to ask you, you mentioned you were talking back a little while ago about the SDRs.
Yes.
And I wanted to know a little bit more about that. There have been some questions that have come in regarding that. Many people are asking, here's one question. It says, I've read that the global currency reset is a quote, unquote, basket of currencies, and apparently along with it are SDRs. What is your knowledge and opinion on this, and why is it said that this concept is a cabal creation?
This is what the cabal wants. That's why they're weakening the dollar. And it's not in the cards. It's not happening.
Good.
Yeah. This is the agenda of those people who want to bring the United States down.
Yes.
But they're not getting away with it. It's not happening.
Now, do you feel that there will be a need for a new president in order to bring the change in the new financial system forward?
The reason I'm hesitating is because of who our vice president is. Biden is not going to be any improvement.
No.
Yeah?
No.
And so we're going to have to try to figure out how to negotiate ourselves through, it's kind of like you're in a canoe and going over the white water. I'm not going to, we're all in this canoe together. I don't want to be distracting ourselves and hitting rocks. I don't know the answer to that question, but I do know this, that in the election, when we had the debate, first of all, it used to be the debate was run by the League of Women Voters. No, now they've got a presidential debate commission, which they're there to make sure that there's no real debate. I went to NBC and I said, there is world corruption, and I want you to ask a question about this world corruption. No, they didn't ask that question. And Mitt Romney had as his national transition planning chief Robert Zoellick, who was the president of the World Bank and was not given a second term because of his complicity with all of this corruption. So, it's not, we're not going to have some ready solutions. We're just going to all have to work together and keep our eye on the ball as we go forward.
Now,
but yeah.
Well, I was going to ask you, Karen, how can the person that's listening to your interview right now, how can they help you? How can they help you with your cause to bring this about?
The very first thing is to get yourself organized with your family and your community so that you're plugged in. You don't want to be doing this as an individual because you're not going to be effective. You're not going to be able to sort through all of the information that's coming down the pike. As I said, you cannot just turn on your TV and expect that you're going to be informed. It's hard work to stay on top of this. Now, you can follow me on Twitter, which is great. I would love to say, just follow me and I'll lead you in the right place and we'll all be there together. But that's not the answer. I'm just one of a group sorting through this very complex system. And the best thing you can do is keep yourself informed, protect all the whistleblowers, be critical to figure out whether they're a real whistleblower or not. Just, put on your thinking cap, I think is the easy way to answer. But you can certainly tell your county executive that you heard about what this corruption I was reporting and you want something to be done about this before the world goes to hell in a handbasket. And we need to do what John F. Kennedy was doing. That's the very first thing. We have to have dollars issued by the U.S. Treasury backed by the gold that John F. Kennedy had lined up for us. And if we get that, believe me, we'll be well on our way. That's the simple thing. We've got a wonderful, ready solution that John F. Kennedy had lined up for us, and that's why he was killed, because we were taking back our strength from the Jesuits.
Do you agree that the bankers are running scared now because of all the multitude of lawsuits and the amount of exposure that's come about regarding LIBOR and fraud, et cetera?
No, because the courts are totally corrupt. And we've got to we've got to do first things first. We've got to focus now on getting clean, good currency, because if we don't do that soon, we won't ever be able to do it and we'll go into the dark ages. Let's, keep our eye on the ball. Let's not get distracted by chasing after bankers. We can go get them after we're going to be able to feed ourselves and our families.
Interesting. So that's the number one goal, is just to get the gold for humanity.
To get the dollars that John, he printed them. They're in a bank. They're uncut. They just have to come out and be cut. And, that's not the gold. That's the Treasury dollars. And then we can mint the gold and have that serve as our currency. But there'll be other currencies. There's something called legal tender laws, which says that only the Federal Reserve note is legal. No, we need to be allowed to have local jurisdictions have their own local currency, and that way you get full employment. That's something that an economist named Silvio Giselle came up with. There's so many things that we can do to have a strong country and strong economy, and we can do those things. I mean, we are going to come out of this. I think the chances that we come out of this much better than we went into it are 90 to 95%. I believe in the accuracy of that power transition model. I think humanity will be working together to get things straightened out. And then just, stay tuned and be a citizen, which means inform yourself and stay involved. And at the local level, right now, immediately, you can go to your county executive. My county executive is the president of the County Executives of America. He was elected in July because a group of people had gone to the County Executives of America and said, we need to get our counties to weigh in with our governors to get this terrible corruption straightened out. So, I mean, we've got existing institutions that we can use, and we should use them. I mean, I'm not saying don't change things. I'm just saying what we have is serviceable enough so that we can get ourselves turned around.
I agree too. I think this is a very exciting time to be alive, and we are going back to the old ways if we want to bring this about. And one of them is to go on a local level. And for those of you out there that are apprehensive to take this on by yourself, form a group, form a meetup group, and make a decision as to who you want to voice an opinion to, because we are the ones with the numbers, not the elite. And we have the power, and we are starting to wake up. It's like they say, the sleeping giant starting to wake up. So, hey, Karen, question. You mentioned that we just need to get the currency out and then mint the gold, right?
Yes.
So what is the next step in order to do that?
Get me back in the World Bank.
You go, girl. I love it.
The 188 ministers of finance. I bought a World Bank bond that they settled my lawsuit.
Wow.
And the only thing keeping me from walking back in the door is the security firm named Allied Barton that's owned by that network of control. And there's another firm waiting in the wings to take their place. So we're not that far away from it.
Interesting. So once this other firm takes their place, there's a little bit more flexibility then?
It's not flexibility. I just walk back in the door.
Mm.
That security guard firm is not letting me in the door. That's all.
Got it. Excellent. Well, hey, we'll put it out there. Put a request to the universe.
Yes.
Let her in.
Right. Me and the rest of the World Bank whistleblowers. One person isn't going to turn this around. But, I've asked, we're a feisty bunch. I said, if we go back in, can we turn this thing around? They said, we sure can.
Oh, my gosh, that's exciting. Well, tell me a little bit. We haven't talked at all about the Federal Reserve. Tell me a little bit about, what state are they in at this point? I keep reading bits and pieces that they're in a state of panic as well, and I wanted to hear what your opinion was on that.
Yes, well, it's not the U.S. government, Federal Reserve. It's a private bank. It's owned by this network of control, and they are scrambling because this paper currency is not, it's not going to continue, and it's starting to fray around the edges as we speak. They went out and made all these bad economic decisions, and they're stuck with them. They're bankrupt. So, and to make matters worse for them, they've issued all these bonds, so they know that they owe all this money that they don't have. They are totally bankrupt, and they also know that the word is out, and people know what they really are. So they're not in a strong position whatsoever. Their currency is, I'll provide some links for you. This quantitative easing was done deliberately to weaken the dollar because they thought that we would then agree that they would have something else. But we haven't agreed. So they have nothing. It's like think of a chess game, and they've been in checkmate for a while. That's how the Federal Reserve is.
And do you actually feel that they are losing their stronghold in the BRICS nations? I mean, has that pretty much been what would you say? You know, I watch the BRICS nations with a lot of hope. So I was just wondering, have they affected the Federal Reserve in any way, their alliance?
Of course they have. As I said, the dollar is no longer an unquestioned reserve currency.
Well, I don't mean like the obvious. I just mean the unobvious, that we're not seeing behind closed doors, that you would have an intuition about because you've been with the World Bank.
Okay, the strongest place where they are hurting is, an organization has got to project a sense of a future so that people want to go there and cast their fate with that organization. I would not be surprised if people are leaving that place in droves. Yeah, because it doesn't have a future. And it's not going to have a future. It has no future. The biggest challenge I see with the Federal Reserve is how to dismantle that place smoothly so that we do not end up with, in economics, there's something called a multiplier effect. There has to be time for people to leave that industry in a way that isn't going to create, if you just take away a lot of jobs all at once,
right, then
it's going to affect all of the other sectors.
Sure.
Because when a person gets a salary, they then spend it. And if a person loses their job, then they don't spend it. And those other industries, like they're not going to go to restaurants, they're not going to buy houses. So we have to find a way to dismantle the banking industry. We don't need a banking industry like we've had to create, these terrible. It's been there for control. And we don't need that. People should have enough money. They should have saved money that they can go out and buy the houses they want. There shouldn't have to be mortgages on houses.
It's true.
There is just so much dead weight in our economy because of all of these banks that are there to control us. If we have a different way of a different financial sector, then we don't need this kind of parasitical organization taking the lifeblood out of our economies. But so the real challenge I see is how do we get from where we are and get people out of this parasitic industry. You need a certain number of, you need some people in the financial sector, but you don't need an army to control you, which is what the current financial sector has been, with a lot of huge salaries at the top.
Yeah,
where they're owning industry, where the banks themselves have become investment entities. That's
right.
Where that's because the Glass-Steagall laws.
Yeah, I know, and total collusion
were repealed. So to not to go on and on. This is not something that one individual is going to design. This is something that is going to have to take some effort, and it's not going to happen at a central planning level either.
That was what I was going to ask you next, is how do you see that unfolding? And you also have mentioned before, a specific set of protocols. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I think probably the best way to describe it is that as we move away from this currency where you have to pay interest, we're not going to be spending all of our time generating tax money to send off to pay interest. And then people themselves at a local level are going to have to start getting involved in how they want their communities to be run. It's not going to be top down, it's going to be bottom up. And when you've got currencies where you don't have to pay interest, you can see how that's going to free the various communities up. They're not, and obviously there's going to be some retrofitting that's going to happen between the states and the federal government layers. I mean, that's what the state of Georgia has already said. But it's going to take many decades of careful thinking to figure out how it's going to go in the future. Yeah, this isn't going to be something that one person is going to sit down and decide. This is going to be something that we all are going to be working on, and our children are going to be working on.
Yeah, this is a huge undertaking because it's impacting every person on the planet, that's for sure. So, I mean, at this point, do you see any of the banks on the planet being, I mean, is there any bank out there right now that you feel is a stable sort of, on a new path? I mean, there have been some rumors that quite a few banks are popping up with some of the new money. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, some people contacted me about a bank that the Lakota Indians had set up using gold as a reserve, and of course in the States you've got North Dakota has its own state bank, but I think we're going to be I don't think we have all that many models that we can be happy with right now. I think we're going to have to be working this out.
Yeah, that's a good point. And this is the $64 million question. People ask this all the time. What do you recommend? Like, what are you doing for your family as far as protecting your assets at this point in time when the economy and the financial system is so on the verge of collapsing?
Well, I'll tell you, this is a difficult thing to answer because as a whistleblower, my family has been under attack. So my husband moved out in November, right? Aww. We celebrated our 25th wedding anniversary together. We had dinner. We're good friends. He just didn't like the fact that all the FBI agents were coming to the door and stuff. I mean, I can't blame the guy. So.
Well, you probably went from one radical experience in life to another, right?
Well, anyway, but in terms of investment, I think it's a good idea to have some precious metals close to hand because although I say we're going to go smoothly, that's a wish. I don't have any guarantees on that. So, but on the other hand, if everybody takes all their money out of the banks, then that's going to create problems too.
Oh, big time. Well, this brings up have you ever heard of NESARA?
Oh, I have, yeah.
Okay, tell us a little bit about what you think about that. That's a hot topic.
I don't give any credence to it.
None at all.
None whatsoever.
Bummer. Well, it's got some really good postures to it, though. I don't know if you've read up on it.
I have, and this business about the farmer years ago and bringing a case, things that sound too good to be true, they are not true.
And so what about now, have you heard about OPPT?
That is pure, unadulterated BS. The problem that they describe is absolutely correct, but the solution is absolutely of no account. It's a way of distracting people. And some of these people have actually extracted money from people because they thought this was going to help them, and they've preyed off of these people. It's really terrible.
So you feel that the cabal is behind the OPPT?
Yes, and one way you can find this out is if you look at this stuff, the materials, it's all very, very slick. And they use the same, the OPPT and the ones that are talking about the prosperity accounts, they've been using, for heaven's sakes, the same video artists.
So that goes for even the Hollow Earth Fund. There's quite a few of them out there, actually.
That is just a way of trying to get people lined up against that, to support them as it's a money grab. There's nothing to them. They're trying to steal the world's gold to fund themselves, and they're trying to get people to support them so that they have a chance at it. It's a scam.
Now, I really want to hear your opinion on Swiss Indo.
Scam.
Another one.
Yeah.
So the descendant of King Solomon.
This is a way of figuring out that the gold is real, because these scam artists are trying to find a way to grab at it.
So all of these are an attempt to capture the gold.
That's correct.
Wow. And I mean, have the whistleblowers actually chased that down all the way to where the original source is?
I've had people writing me, telling me about, this Swiss Indo fellow who says he's descended from the King Solomon. I mean, it's just abysmal. They're trying to, get buy-in from people.
Now, I did write down a report, and I'm sure you're going to be disgusted, but I did write down a report, and it says that Wolfgang Struck was supposedly a senior CIA agent out of Germany, linked with Keith Scott and associated with stealing collateral accounts. What is your comment on that?
You should see the email between him and Keith Scott that I just saw. Because Keith Scott was saying that the collateral accounts could not be released at this time. And Wolfgang just raked him over the coal.
Well, you know what? Do me a favor and provide that link to me, and I will put it up on my website.
Okay, I could provide lots of links to you. I don't know if Wolfgang wants that last bit between them.
Well, just, you can give me whatever you guys feel comfortable with. But, I mean, the more we can educate people to see your point of view and to see the information that you've already worked on, the better.
Yeah, I'll send this interview to Wolfgang and let him hear it, and maybe he'll let us release that. Of course,
that would be great. And now you also mentioned something about the group of whistleblowers being all over the world, in the UK, Mexico, India, and Ethiopia. Do you find that this group is growing? And if so, is there a way to get in touch with you for those that actually really are starting to see, some not so good goings on within their own institutions that they're working for?
They can always contact me. I've got a website with a contact page. Now, the whistleblowers, many of them are living in Washington still because they were at the World Bank. Some of them have gone home. But, I've asked them whether some of them wanted to take a more public role. And so far, Elaine is the only one that's been really way out there with me.
Yeah. And, a lot of people are just fascinated by the fact that you are so high profile. Have you really had to really watch your security and safety since you came out with all this information?
Yeah, I have. I mean, it's been that way all along. I had to bring my car in. The axle was broken, and I was driving around with a broken axle. And I said, does this model have broken axles? They said, no, this is the first I've seen.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So you just live with it.
It's crazy. And one other thing I wanted to ask you, tell me what your perspective is on the whole Bitcoin situation.
Yeah. Look, there are a lot of cryptocurrencies, and just today somebody was showing me a currency which is using gold bullion. I think you have to take all of this stuff with a grain of salt. I mean, the paper currencies are not going to be with us for very long, and I don't know if we're going to be able to get the real currencies backed by gold out there in time. So it would be, you don't want to use Bitcoin like a bank account. I mean, just imagine if something happens and you forget your password or something. You can make payments with it, but its value is fluctuating all over the place. So I think you've got to let the buyer beware. You haven't mercifully asked me about the investment in Iraqi dinar.
I know, I did. I haven't asked you that.
Oh my God, that's more questions on that than anything else. I'm so tired of that discussion.
Since you brought it up, Karen.
Huh?
Since you brought it up.
Yeah, I think it's a scam, unfortunately, and I know a lot of people who didn't have a lot of money to invest, did that, and they're now, in hot water. You have to be careful about what you do, and I think, for example, if you want to buy some silver coins, do it from a reputable dealer.
Well, now I'm going to change the direction of where we're going before I let you go, and I wanted you to just talk a little bit more about the power transition model, and to try to explain to people why this has credence and why you're feeling so optimistic about the change that is about to take place on the planet.
Oh, bless you for that question, Alexander. That's my favorite question.
Good. I didn't know that, folks.
Okay. What is that? I can explain it to you this way. Before I went to the World Bank, I worked for the U.S. Export-Import Bank, and there was a flight simulator. And what happened at the Export-Import Bank was a guy from Ecuador kept flunking the flight pilot simulator test, and he thought the problem was that it was not a good simulator. And so he got in a real airplane, and he was a senior member of the Air Force, and he ordered the pilot to let him fly the real plane, and he did in reality what he did with the flight simulator. He crashed the plane. The power transition model is a simulator, and of course, if you give it the wrong information, then it's not going to simulate very much. It's garbage in, garbage out. But if you have a good understanding of a situation, then that model is 90 to 95% accurate. And they have tested it over, there's an article that I can show everybody where they're talking about how the experience is. This model came out of the Defense Department, but it was put together by a political scientist. And whenever there was a disagreement between an intelligence analyst and the model won hands down. And the way they explain it is that when people are trying to predict what's happening in the future, the analysts would say what's happening today is going to be like what happens tomorrow. But what this model does is it predicts where the coalitions will form. And so what is the information that you're supposed to feed into the model? You're supposed to look at any given problem, and you're supposed to say how powerful are the groups they call it stakeholders, the groups that have an influence on the problem. How powerful are those groups? Where do they stand on the problem? And you also have to figure out how important that issue is to them. So, for example, you could have, say, the President of the United States. They're very powerful, but they have so much going on their plate that an issue is not going to get their attention. So you also have to try to figure out how important that issue is to them. Anyway, and what you do is you come up with numbers, and you put those numbers in the model, and the model crunches them. And so I did a model of rule of law at the World Bank, and you can see the numbers I came up with. As far as the relative strength of the countries, I just used the voting power inside the organization because that's weighted by the size of their economies. And then I had to say, where do they stand on rule of law? You can see what I thought. And one of the mistakes I made was I gave a positive role to the media. I didn't understand that the media was owned by the cabal and that they didn't want to give the true news to people, that they would do a cover-up. So I made a mistake on that. But at the same time I did my estimate of the model, Jacek Kugler had published an article in 2004 about where the world was going in a power transition from east to west. And what he wrote was that the Germans played a very important role, and the relationship between the United States and Germany was vital, and that because Germany and the United States were disagreeing, this was what was opening up an opportunity for China. and that if the United States and Russia was actually, and Japan, that all of those countries were part of the West, and that it was very important for the United States to work together with its allies and not lose them. And so there was a problem at the World Bank with Paul Wolfowitz. He was blackmailing the members of the board. Remember what happened with Eliot Spitzer when Eliot Spitzer lost the governorship of New York because he went to the New York Madam? Well, they were blackmailing the members of the board of the World Bank who patronized the New York Madam to try to prevent them from firing Paul Wolfowitz. And I found out about this because I speak Dutch, and it was Herman Wijfels, who represented the Dutch government on the board, who was leading in the effort to fire Paul Wolfowitz. And so Herman Wijfels went public in Dutch. And since I speak Dutch, I saw that the U.S. was blackmailing the executive directors. So I went back to the United States. I just happened to be there when that story broke. And I said, you cannot be blackmailing the executive directors because we're about to lose the gentleman's agreement, and that's only going to make it worse. And, of course, that's exactly what happened. But anyway, so getting back to the power transition model, it predicts where the coalitions will form. And the basic point is that if the United States focuses on keeping its allies happy, then China doesn't come up way fast. China will come up in a century. But what's happened is the United States, the Federal Reserve, is not giving Germany its gold back. That's an act of war. And Germany helicopter buzzed the U.S. consulate in Frankfurt. And I went back to the Department of Defense and I said, we're losing all our allies. This is what the model predicts. That's because we've got the Federal Reserve there. We're doing what the Vatican wants us to do. The Vatican owns the Federal Reserve. That's what that is. The Federal Reserve is just part and parcel of the network of control that's being exerted by the Vatican. And I say the Vatican, it's really just the Jesuits. And when I say the Jesuits are actually acting for the Homo capensis. That's why they're doing all these terrible things with Fukushima and with the chemtrails and with the MK Ultra mind control. What you've got is the very corrupt layers of humanity are betraying humanity.
And the corrupt layers of humanity are betrayed by the Homo capensis.
Well,
think about it.
Homo capensis has the interest of its race. Its species, not its race. We're talking about a different species. They're so different that when they try to have offspring with Homo sapiens, the offspring is not fertile. And this group, there was just an analysis of their DNA. Their offspring is not viable because there's been so much interbreeding, because there weren't so many of them left after the Ice Age.
Do you know? Are you aware of how many are left now? I mean, how big the species is on the planet?
Well, I do know that they're still very much there and running around. Some guy in Portugal wrote me that he saw them at a meeting of bankers, and then Ed Spencer is in touch with someone who was in Egypt and saw them running around in Egypt. So they're out and running around.
It's very interesting. I just blogged, literally just a couple days ago, I just blogged a very interesting post that came across my desk. Over 300 elongated skulls were found in Caracas.
Yes, that's the species.
Okay,
and,
wow.
There's a lot of misinformation. Some people say, well, it was binding. It's not that the skulls were bigger. But no, when the DNA analysis came back, it is a different species.
And this is going back almost 6,000 years ago, right?
It's going back to the previous Ice Age.
Ice Age, okay.
And don't forget, I didn't tell you about the map. There's a map that comes from the previous Ice Age that shows how Antarctica, the landmass before the ice froze, what its contours are. And now that they can use radar to find out how the coastline, they can see that map, which was done before the Ice Age, has an accurate portrayal of the coastline. And if you look at the level of water has risen 400 meters. So there's buildings right off the coast of different continents that shows what that civilization's buildings looked like. And there were a lot of them in South Africa, which is, of course, where humanity started. When people go back and look at the DNA, that's where humanity was. Yeah. Humanity was probably imprisoned and kept like cattle. And there was some kind of, we got out, we escaped.
This is fascinating. Can you forward that link over to me, the map? I would love to look at the map.
Yeah. What I will forward you is the letter that Ed wrote to the U.S. military, which has all of the sources that I'm citing.
I mean, I'm really glad you brought this out because it's just once again connecting the dots. And everybody is very aware of another presence on this planet, whatever you want to call it, but this just ties it all in. And one of the things that people are always astonished with is, how can this faction, this group of beings be so ruthless and unheartfelt, and they're not human. They're not human. I say that all the time. But anyway, well, Karen, it's been a pleasure to interview you today, and I appreciate you canvassing so many different questions with me and filling us in.
They were great questions, Alexandra. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. And hopefully we'll have you on again with really good news that we've got you back in the World Bank and the power of the people and the gold back. Would that not be the most incredible day of our lives?
That would be great.
Yes, it would.
I think we're on track for it, actually.
I do, too. I definitely do. And I want to remind everybody, please support Karen Hudes' work. Please visit her website at www.kahudes.net. And Karen, did you want them to check out any other links before I let you go?
I'll send them to you, and you can follow me on Twitter as well, at Karen Hudes, just run together.
Sounds awesome. Well, I want to thank you again, and I thank everybody for listening. And like you said, put your thinking cap on, start getting active, get off the couch. We need you guys to be active. This is the time to take our world back. We are one, and we can do this. And we are doing this. So don't lose the faith. So blessings, everybody. Love you all, and you guys take care. Have a great afternoon, Karen.
Thank you.
Thank you.